"You've always been the issue," my brother snapped. My mom crossed his arms and proclaimed, "Things were better before you returned." I didn't respond. I just grabbed my keys and left. That was yesterday. This morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, watching the notification count climb. 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother, 3 from my brother, 2 from my sister-in-law. The voicemails probably started apologetic and grew increasingly desperate. I didn't listen to a single one. 24 hours ago, I was still playing the role of the grateful younger son, the one who came crawling back home after my divorce, tail between my legs, asking for a place to crash while I got back on my feet. 24 hours ago, I still believed family meant something. The confrontation had been building for weeks. Every snide comment from my brother about me freeloading, every passive-aggressive remark from Mom about how much easier things were when it was just the three of them, him, his wife, and her precious firstborn. I'd been paying rent, helping with groceries, doing more than my share of housework. But apparently, my mere existence was the problem. It started over something stupid. I'd used the last of the coffee creamer. My brother exploded, telling me I was inconsiderate, that I always took without asking, that I was just like Dad before he left. Then came the words that cut deepest. "You've always been the issue." Mom didn't defend me. Instead, she crossed her arms and delivered the final blow. "Things were better before you returned." I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't point out the countless times I'd helped them over the years, or how I'd taken care of Mom when she broke her hip while my brother was too busy with work. I just grabbed my keys and walked out. The motel room I'd been in for the past day wasn't much, but it was mine. No judgment, no walking on eggshells, no pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I'd been thinking, planning, remembering things I'd pushed aside for years. My phone buzzed again. A text from my sister-in-law. "Please call back. Your mom is worried sick. We need to talk." I almost laughed. Worried sick. Where was that worry when they were systematically breaking me down? When they made it clear I was nothing more than an inconvenience in their perfect little world? But their panic gave me an idea. A terrible, satisfying idea. Update 1. The missed calls had stopped, replaced by increasingly frantic text messages. My brother's tone had shifted from demanding to pleading. Mom was apparently beside herself. They'd even called my ex-wife asking if she'd heard from me. Perfect. I spent the morning at the bank. Turns out, when you help your elderly mother manage her finances for 2 years, you end up on quite a few accounts. Joint signatory privileges she'd insisted on when her arthritis made writing checks difficult. Access I'd never abused, never even thought about. Until now. I didn't clean out the accounts. I wasn't a thief. But I did withdraw my portion of several investments we'd made together. Money I'd contributed when Mom was struggling with property taxes. Funds I'd added to her emergency account during my better financial days. Technically, legally mine. The withdrawals would show up on Monday's bank statements. Next stop, the storage unit. Mom had asked me to help clean out Dad's things after he passed 3 years ago. We'd kept everything for sentimental value, she'd said. What she hadn't mentioned was that some of those boxes contained documents. Important ones. Birth certificates, insurance papers, Dad's will, the real one, not the copy Mom had shown my brother. The one where Dad had left me the old cabin upstate. The property Mom claimed had been sold years ago to pay for his medical bills. I'd stumbled across the truth by accident 6 months ago, but hadn't said anything. Family harmony and all that. But harmony was a two-way street, and I'd been the only one trying to maintain it. The cabin was in rough shape, but livable. More importantly, it was mine, free and clear. I'd discovered Mom had been collecting rental income on it for 3 years, telling my brother it was from investments. My phone rang. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful message about how sorry she was, how they'd overreacted, how I needed to come home so they could explain. Too late for explanations. Update 2. Monday morning brought the storm I'd been expecting. My brother called at 6 a.m., screaming about the bank withdrawals, threatening to call the police. I calmly explained that I'd only taken what was legally mine and suggested he check the account records more carefully. The silence that followed was beautiful. Mom called an hour later, her voice shaking. She wanted to know where I'd gotten the money to disappear so completely. I told her about the cabin, about Dad's will, about the rental income she'd been hiding. For the first time in years, my mother was speechless. The lawyer I'd consulted, Dad's old friend who drafted the original will, was very interested in what I had to tell him. Turns out, hiding inherited property and collecting rental income under false pretenses had legal implications. Who knew? I wasn't interested in destroying my family, despite everything. I just wanted what was mine and an acknowledgement of what they'd done. The lawyer explained my options. I could pursue criminal charges for fraud, or we could settle this quietly. My brother showed up at the cabin Tuesday evening. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes red, clothes wrinkled. He'd driven 3 hours to find me, probably expecting the same doormat he'd been walking over for months. He started with anger, demanding I return the money, accusing me of theft and manipulation. I let him rant for 10 minutes before I handed him a copy of Dad's will and the rental income records I'd found. Watching his face change from rage to confusion to horror was almost worth the years of abuse. He tried to explain, to justify. Mom didn't know what she was doing after Dad died. They needed the money. They were going to tell me eventually. All the usual excuses. I asked him one simple question. If they were so desperate for money, why had they spent the last 6 months telling me what a burden I was? Why make me feel like I was taking food from their mouths when they were profiting from property that belonged to me? He didn't have an answer. Update 3. The family meeting happened Thursday. Mom, my brother, his wife, and me, sitting around the same kitchen table where they'd made it clear I wasn't wanted just a week ago. The atmosphere was suffocating. Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years. She kept wringing her hands, stealing glances at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd been a stranger to them for longer than I'd realized. My brother had prepared a speech. He apologized for his words, claimed stress from work had made him say things he didn't mean. His wife nodded along, playing the supportive spouse, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. They weren't sorry for hurting me. They were sorry they'd been caught. Mom's apology was more genuine, but equally hollow. She admitted to hiding the cabin and the rental income, claimed she'd been protecting me from the burden of property management. She'd planned to tell me eventually, after I got back on my feet. I let them talk, let them offer their justifications and excuses. When they finished, I laid out my terms. First, they would sign over full control of the cabin to me, no strings attached. Second, they would pay me the 3 years of rental income they'd hidden, minus reasonable maintenance costs they could document. Third, they would acknowledge publicly, to the extended family who'd heard their version of events, that I hadn't been freeloading, that I'd been paying my way and contributing to the household. My brother's face went red. He started to argue about the money, about how unfair I was being, about how families should forgive and forget. I stood up to leave. That's when Mom broke down completely. She begged me to stay, to work this out, to not abandon the family. She admitted they'd treated me horribly, that they'd taken out their own financial stress on me, that they'd been wrong about everything. But here's the thing about apologies. They need to come before you're caught, not after. They need to be about making things right, not about avoiding consequences. I told them I'd think about it and left. Final update. It's been 2 weeks since the family meeting. I'm still at the cabin, and I've decided to stay. The rental income over 3 years, plus what I'd saved, gives me enough to fix this place up properly. I've already started renovations. My brother transferred the back rental payments yesterday. Mom signed over the deed. The public acknowledgement happened at Sunday dinner with my aunt and uncle, the same people who'd been told I was a deadbeat taking advantage of my poor mother. But the most satisfying part wasn't the money or even the vindication. It was the phone call I received yesterday from my ex-wife. She'd been contacted by my family during their panic, and they'd told her their version of events, how I'd stolen money and abandoned them in their time of need. She'd called to check on me, expecting to find me in the middle of some kind of breakdown. Instead, she found me calm, settled, and finally free from the people who'd been poisoning my life for years. We talked for 2 hours. Really talked, for the first time since our divorce. She admitted she'd heard my family's constant criticism of me during our marriage, how they'd made subtle comments about my career, my choices, my worth. She'd thought it was normal family dynamics. Now she understood it had been systematic undermining. We're going to meet for coffee next week. Not to rekindle anything, but to talk honestly about what went wrong and why. Maybe we can be friends. Maybe we can't. But at least it'll be real, without my family's poison in the background. Mom calls every few days now. The conversations are awkward, stilted. She wants forgiveness, wants things to go back to normal. But there is no normal anymore. They showed me who they really were, and I can't unsee it. My brother hasn't called at all. His wife sends occasional texts asking about family gatherings, as if nothing happened. I don't respond. The cabin is quiet in a way I'd forgotten was possible. No walking on eggshells, no analyzing every word for hidden criticism, no wondering if I'm somehow in the way of other people's happiness. I wake up to 17 missed calls that morning thinking my family was worried about me. Now I realize they were worried about themselves, about what they'd lose when their designated scapegoat finally refused to play the role. They were right about one thing: things were better before I returned. For them, they had their perfect little unit, their shared resentments, their convenient target for everything that went wrong in their lives. But things are better now for me too. Better in ways I didn't know were possible. The morning sun streams through the cabin windows I've been repairing, casting everything in golden light. My phone sits silent on the counter. No missed calls, no desperate messages, no one demanding I apologize for existing. I pour my coffee, using all the creamer I want, and step onto the porch Dad built 30 years ago. The view stretches for miles. Nothing but trees and sky and possibility. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I'm exactly where I belong. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.